And here is my fellow team member, Karen. Karen is going to lead the panel on democratizing WebXR. I'll hand straight over to you. Karen, enjoy this one.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Daniel. I think someone took, there's Mark is back. Okay, right. Okay. Yes, good. Well, Sean, you gave us a nice lead into this panel, which is called Democratizing WebXR. And they're just two words, but they're big ones. And with WebXR, we have the web itself, which is a pretty big topic on its own. And then there is XR, which encompasses hardware of various kinds, plus an enormous range of experiences. And we have WebXR, which is its own particular thing. And that's not even to mention the concept of democratization. So we have a lot to talk about today, and I'm thrilled to be able to facilitate this conversation among our amazing panelists. I am Karen Alexander. I'm a member of the Poly's WebXR events team, and I work with Metaverse on immersive learning for enterprise clients, as well as their for enterprise clients and on compliance. I do consulting primarily in the immersive education space through my company XR Connected, and I'm also one of the co-founders of XR Women, which I'm very proud of. And I would like to invite our panelists to take just a few seconds to introduce themselves. So Damon, let's start with you, because I'm going to come back and throw the first question to you. So we'll start with you on the intros.
Sure. Yeah, I'm a fan of web. Been looking at web and immersive web since 2000, and then also how, I guess, the emerging metaverse, using that moniker since 2007, actually, how that relates to the real world and the built environment, and been involved with the standards of that, and then also development of different XR on the web for quite some time.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks so much for agreeing to be on this panel. Rolando, would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Can you all hear me? Yeah, super excited to be here with such a great panel. So I'm a neuroscientist in the Filmmaker. What that means for neuroscience is that I use VR, I use machine learning and neuroimaging to study how context and how people's prior knowledge of the world influences their perception and their memory of real world events. And neuroimaging, for those that don't know, is just a fancy word to say that I scan people's brains with MRI machines. And then on the filmmaking side, I like to do experimental films, but I also make tutorials on mobile AR apps and simple VFX with Blender and After Effects.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rolando. Great to have you here. And finally, Mark, please introduce yourself to our community.
Yeah, hello. Karen, thanks a lot for putting this together, and it's great to meet both of you and be here. Mark Stephen Meadows, also known occasionally as Pighead. I've been wandering around in virtual worlds since the 90s, and I have spent my career writing books and producing art, starting companies and inventing patents across a range of different technologies. I work primarily at the intersection of machine learning, language processing, and then also real-time 3D. So I'm basically just an aging Dungeons and Dragons geek who likes to make conversational avatars. Last 10 years, I was the CEO at Botanic Technologies. We were working with Fortune 100 companies around the globe, as well as small startups, to provide augmented reality and virtual reality robots or avatars that would talk and engage in natural language. And about 2 years ago, I had the pleasure of no longer being CEO, and I'm now serving as Chief Technology Officer at Idoru World. And Idoru is building an app that lets Gen Z create and edit and place a photoreal avatar of themselves. And I notice now that we all have sort of a very liquid personality online. We each have different ways in which we present our past or our face or our work itself. And so this app is something that allows people to leave a version of themselves looking the way that they want it to, and interact across a range of different mechanisms, both from autonomy and from kind of puppet string real time. So hello, I'm glad to be here. Thank you. Thank you.
Mark, we should totally chat offline because I'm working on a research project that is very related to a lot of the things that you just said. So, yeah.
Cool. Let's talk online too. We're here. Let's go.
Yeah.
Great, love to see these connections happen. That's awesome. Yeah, we like to spark collaborations and exciting new things. Awesome. Yes. Okay, fantastic. Thanks so much for agreeing to be here, Mark. And I will say too that you said this is your first public speaking appearance in a while, right?
Yeah, in 2018, I spent those 52 weeks in 30 cities. And it's cool to see the world. It's great to travel around. When you wake up in the shower and you're like, what city am I in? I can't remember even the country. I think it's Germany. It's Germany. Yeah, I can tell it's German from the shower. And I was like, no way. I'm done. So I thought it's an honor to have people listen to what you want to say. And it's also nice to spend time with my family too.
Great. Awesome. Yes, I'm sure Damon can sympathize with that feeling. I know he's been traveling a lot too. So, I spoke with each of you beforehand to prepare for this panel. And I want to start out by asking Damon to share his thoughts on the web, what it is, the nature of it, and what it has to do with the concept of democratization.
Well, I mean, I guess that's kind of a tough thing with something that you love so much, right? It's like you want to start flipping through a bunch of pictures, but I think for me, it's really, a super amazing communication tool, right? And sharing. So that's not like number one of how I have found value in it, right? Is being able to connect with other people, share experiences, but then also experience what other people have done. I mean, that's the thing for me as a person who's looked to build communities, is because I want to see people like Mark, like Rolando, like build these amazing things that then I can go experience without any barriers to entry, make it as frictionless as possible. And then also see those same creators be able to share that all around the world, right? I mean, because, there are certain places where, app stores may not be allowed if you're a certain, person in a certain country, or as we talked about, being able to, we take, I think our privilege of having unlimited data and all these things kind of for granted when there's places in the world where you have to pay for that, right? And so I think the web is really amazing at democratizing creativity, sharing, and information. And then what all of these things, XR or the web, allow for, I think, is really about connecting with one another. So for me, I think that's kind of what I find so exciting about the web.
Great. And I really like that you are taking a global perspective there in your thoughts about this, and sort of looking at this issue from that, and not just a North American one. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Rolando, can you pick up on that same sort of topic and riff on the idea of the web itself and democratization?
Yeah, I mean, like when we were talking offline, the word democratization stood out to me particularly, and I think that it's a tough word. It's a very tough word because it's used around a lot. It's used to describe countries that aren't really fully democratic. I feel like there's actually, I wish I knew this, but there's a political philosopher that said that a true democracy is one person, one vote, which means that there's equal weighting in value to how people have a say, right? And like, in one way to look at it is in terms of access, right? A democratic, a sort of democratized kind of environment is one where there's access to information and access to having a say. And when I think about the way that it's used often in sort of the sort of consumer space and also the industry space of we're democratizing this technology, making it available for everybody. That's kind of a very interesting term because when you think about it, that kind of means we're making things affordable, right? Headsets are going down to a price point that people can afford. It means that people are aware that there's technology that they can access, and how Damon was talking about, we want to democratize it so that people that wouldn't have access to a phone can still participate in these, world changing, paradigm shifting technologies of of being able to be present with other people across the world in a way that the 2D web couldn't do. But can we really call it democratization when the product is available, but the product comes with extra things that, not to get too much into the ethics and the sort of issues that could arise from, sort of invasive sort of technologies. But, when I buy a Coca-Cola can, right, one would say that Coca-Cola cans are sort of, or Coca-Cola bottles are sort of democratized. When I buy one, it's affordable, right? And I get the categorical value of a Coca-Cola, which is the liquid inside. But I also get the cap, the plastic bottle, and the wrapper. And these are all things that I don't necessarily want. And if it was a fully democratic kind of product, then I'd be able to tell Coca-Cola, hey, here's my vote. I don't want to receive plastic bottles anymore. But I can't do that. And one would argue that, yes, I do get a vote. I wanted a Coke, and there I got it. But is it really democratic when I can't really talk about or like change all the things that come with a categorical product? So when I get a headset that's taking potentially information about my nervous system, my EMG that takes information about how my signals to gesture are changing, is that giving me power, or is it taking it away for the future? So I'm just like bringing this up, not to get too philosophical and too ethical, but these are the kinds of things that I think about when I hear the word democratization.
Thank you. So, Mark.
Yeah. I think it's super cool to hear because, Karen, when we were talking, I kind of on the weekend will translate Attic and Homeric Greek, and to me it's like a foundation that I think is useful as we build the future. Words and their meanings, and demos and kratos. You're right, Rolando. This is a pretty pithy cave we've crawled into here. I think that there's something about the cost of democracy and the presumption that true democracy is one person, one vote. Which may or may not be the case. I guess, as I understand it, the very first form of democracy that was built in Athens, please correct me if you hear otherwise, there was a guy named Solon, and he said, okay, all the people that have money here, you can pay to vote. It's almost like a staking mechanism on a blockchain. Like, you can pay to vote, and that gives you a sway. And as a demos kratos, or as a structure that's built by humans, there didn't seem to be the implication that it was one vote for one person. And I think that there's a presumption. I would like to see that, because ultimately it's a question of power, right? I mean, Learning Pathmakers mentions that, let's talk about the rights of things. And I think that that's it. Like, a right determines the quantity, the influence, and the scope of the power that you have within a society. And we want to be fair. We all want to share this. And at the same time, whether we're looking at something like a blockchain pyramid scheme that says, let's all make sure that everyone can get in so that we can reap profits on a very large scale off electoral contributions. Or if it's an autocratic group that says, we have built this and we're going to guide it. And the cost of that democracy is that we're going to collect your information and we're going to sell that for ourselves because we built it. I'm not helping at all. I mean, really, all I'm saying is there's a lot of different assumptions about democracy. And I think that, while we look at the power of the democracy, I think it's important we also evaluate the cost. I mean, it's world changing, especially if it's world building. How's that? There's my pithy statement for the day.
Yeah, I love it.
Sorry.
This is great. These are tough issues, and I'm glad you all are digging in deep. And we were charged to go philosophical here, so don't worry about that, Rolando. So I want to jump onto the topic of democratization of creativity, or accessibility to creativity and opportunities for individuals and for companies, for small individual private companies or entrepreneurial companies to innovate and create. And Rolando, can you speak to that?
Yeah, so I thought about that too. The idea that, when we were talking earlier, we're talking about democratization for the technology being available to the people. But I think that we're in a place in time right now, kind of like resembling the .com boom, where there's a bunch of companies that can now kind of fight with like the big dogs about what's going to happen. And that doesn't always happen, right? Like, I'm using this example because it's the most recent one in my head, and it's not really has to do with AR, but it could, in theory. Figma was bought out by Adobe recently, and they did that from my analysis. I don't know if anybody other people agree, but because they were a threat to Adobe, and they bought them for a lot of money, and that's because they had a freemium way to get users, and they were also on the web, going back to WebXR, right? And Adobe doesn't really have that capability, so it was like a threat, and so they had to buy out the company in order to survive long term. And so I'm thinking now, right, with this kind of metaverse, kind of crypto, not to lump metaverse stuff with the crypto space, but people are intertwining it in the mainstream anyways, so it's we might as well just like include it as part of like the sort of timeline that we're in. There's so many companies. Look at all the really amazing individuals that were here today during this entire summit. Those are some really awesome people doing really awesome things that are going to have a say in how this new technology really shapes education, shapes branding, shapes the way people interact with the world. And that, in a way, is kind of like oddly a democratization industry side, right? The companies now are actually going to be able to have a say in how they place themselves in the market and in a dialogue with the consumers, who also now get to kind of talk and say, I want this product, I want that product. At this point, in this point of inflection, I feel like this is the most pure form of democracy, but also not to conflate it with capitalism. It's a hard line to kind of get at. And I actually wonder what you guys think about that. I'm curious if it's just me just kind of going crazy on these.
Yeah, and especially I think Mark, in terms of your companies and avatars. You talked about democratization of avatars.
Yeah.
You can pick up on Rolando's comments and take it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can get murky quickly as we talk about cryptocurrencies and blockchains. I think what we're looking at is how can we build a system, an avatar that is where, actually, let me back up. So I spent years in Second Life, and I had a blast, and I gave myself carpal tunnel syndrome like 5 times, and I really had some life-changing experiences. I mean, I've traveled a good deal, but that has to have been one of my most extreme travels. And what I was doing in there, I was spending time basically, building eyeballs and mountains and forests and whatever people needed. And as a builder, I had the privilege to kind of sit there and be working on something, and I could hear the conversations behind me. And I was sort of let into the inside of some of these sims that people were developing often for commercial purposes. And over the years, I've really thought about that. Like the fact that these are just assets that an avatar has this whole economic possibility in which, if in the American and very capitalist sense of the term, a company can be legally identified as a person, where is the top of the funnel, if you will, for asset production, intellectual property ownership, and the rights and control of that particular avatar? I think we're going to be seeing a lot of people finding that there are markets. I mean, there already are. Decentraland is one. They're all scattered all over, and I'm very excited now, as an American expat, to see that there's less and less of a center to the internet, physically speaking. More and more sub-markets, more and more places where people can identify the thing that they're looking for, either to sell it or to buy it, with individuals or with a group, with a larger formalized group like a company. And I suspect, government level is sort of the logical progression of that. So the ownership then and the way that these entities interact is going to be key, because that will be defining what the democracy is composed of, right? I think ultimately maybe the thing that we have to do is be conscious about ownership. What is the right to title? How do you identify whether somebody owns a particular avatar or a space or an interaction or asset, a set of data functionality or a data set? And then from there, begin to say, we want to make this as fair as possible. And like people seem to be doing every year, every month, maybe day, is like, let's make it better. Let's make it more fair. Let's recognize people that don't have the privileges that we might have. Let's make sure that there's tools that they can work with. Karen, you mentioned, maybe democracy is something where you don't need knowledge to enter that space. So there's obviously a lot of thinking to be done there, and I'd like to just point to ownership as being maybe a key inflection point for architecting democracies.
Mm.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. Yeah, and Damon. So when we spoke, you talked about empowering creators, so that there's a reflection of creative freedom, and so that the web democratizes creativity and allows voices to be shared. Can you follow up on that, riff on that a little more?
Well, I mean, of course, I mean, just look at, the constraints. I mean, you play in the iOS or the Android box, right? You can, or what you can't do. I mean, if I wanted to make an experience that covered nudity in whatever way, art, whatever, there's going to be issues there, right? And there's a lot of these limits. If I wanted to make a world that was full of hate speech, I wouldn't be able to do that, right? And so I think that it's not just about, hey, let's allow the things that we think are okay. We really have to open it up, and just like the web is, right? There are things on the web that are ugly, they're cruel, they're mean, but that is creative freedom, that is creative expression, right? There are going to be those AR applications in the world that will sell for the bigot, for the racist, for the others, and to me, true creative freedom is saying, you be you. It may not be what I subscribe to, it may not be what I endorse, but you be you. And the web does allow for that, right? And so if we really are about creativity and creative freedom, we have to understand that just like the world is full of ugly, that's going to be a reflection as well. But then there are those people who want to opt into that, right? There are those people who want to participate in that, that want to have some sense of governance, ownership, and things like that in these spaces. So again, maybe not what I subscribe to, but if we truly are about creative freedom and expression of who you are and being able to come together with your tribe, the web is a platform that does allow this, right? But does have that interconnectivity of where someone could go from one experience straight to another through a link or just typing something in a URL, where I feel that a lot of these platforms can allow that. Their business models wouldn't allow for that. Or, it's going to be issues, right? How are you going to have this extreme world that just has a portal to the other side of the extreme, of that topic?
Yeah.
So for me, I think for creative freedom, it really is, that is why the web is so interesting, is because it allows for anyone to have a voice, no matter if we agree with that voice, if we think it's morally or ethically right or not.
Damon, I'm curious, so I agree 100% with you, that giving everybody voices, right? That's kind of what's happening with AI right now, with all these super cool generative networks like Midjourney and other type of diffusion networks and stuff. And I'm wondering, so a lot of these were trained with hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of art pieces of other artists, right? So now when you type something, you can say, hey, make this in the style of Studio Ghibli, or do this, something like that. And they can have a new creation, right? That kind of democratizes the really hard, painstaking process of creating art that they weren't trained to do. But do you think that, I'm so conflicted about this. Do you think it's okay to, make art, right, that uses someone else's style because it's so easy, right? I can just do a text prompt and then boom, it's art. And there's open source projects now that allow you to do that really easily. It's democratizing the power of arts. So now you don't have to worry about the actual technique or anything. Now you can just worry about what's in your head. I'm just always so, yeah.
Well, I would say that I think that, I feel that it's like music, right? How much of music can you sample or take from another person where you're inspired by, but not exactly stealing from? So I don't know in that. But I think, definitely, maybe reference if it's enough. But again, the music industry has done a pretty good job of this. And we're starting to kind of see that. I don't follow a lot of pop music too much, but I'm starting to see now where some of these artists are getting in trouble, and at least maybe just showing my age as someone in their mid 40s. I feel like there's so much samples. It's like so many of the songs that are now popular have these elements of nostalgia or songs that I've heard before. To where it's kind of no, actually, Taylor Swift did not come up with this riff. That's from the 70s, right, or something. So I guess just the quick answer is, flattery is to copy, but stealing is not right. I don't have an answer for you, but I think that, again, that's one of those to where the masses, I think, people are pretty good now about calling people out, right? So if you're an artist and you steal and you say, hey, this is my work online,
Right. Okay. I want to jump into a slightly different area. And Damon, when we spoke, I talked about my personal belief that the purpose of technology is to improve people's lives. And when we're talking about skills that people may not have for various reasons, and the ways that technology, and let's look at XR and or WebXR in particular, the ways that it can extend our skills and our ability to do things. And this is something that you spoke about, Damon. Can you say a little bit about that? About the way that technology can enable people to do more than maybe they can without it.
Well, sure. I mean, and this goes back to, when we were discussing it, to me, the beauty of the web is that everyone that has one of these can access it, right? And again, this going back to, if it's truly democratized, it means everybody can get it. And there's a lot of the world that will never be able to afford a $2 or $200 headset, right? And so in that, it's giving people the power to do things that they can't do already through a platform that we know that works. Right, it's not having to test something out, and that was something for me. I remember when I got invited to the Cura Institute to talk about standards. It was a group in Second Life, and now I'll be honest. Like I didn't understand a lot of the value of Second Life. I found it fun. I too was flying around, back in like 05 and 06 and things like that. But it wasn't until I met this group of people where that's how they got out and did things. Right, that's how if they had some kind of challenge, either physically or mentally, they were able to explore and go do things that they can. And that's also what the web allows for, right? And this goes back to me, immersion is more than just having something strapped in front of my eyes, right? It's about the space. It's about, like the people that, we see in Japan that are paralyzed, that are, actually controlling robot waiters to drop things off, right? And to me, that's a certain level of immersion, right? They're looking at this and doing these things, and we're giving them tech superpowers. So again, I think that's the beauty of the internet, is that it's pretty much everywhere, right? There's not many places where the web isn't already. People aren't already familiar with it, and then there are many examples of how, again, we're using the technology in a way to enrich people's lives.
Great. Yeah. I see Daniel's here, and that's our signal that we're coming close to the end. But I do want to hear a bit more from Mark about what Damon was just speaking about in terms of avatars and AI. Can you wrap that up?
Well, it's interesting because the idea of we want to give people creative license and you do you. I think at my first thought is like, yeah, totally. But then my second thought is like, no, that can't be it. Somehow, through all of this miasma and this like insane hurricane of swirling data, we've got to find a way that we can agree to patterns of behavior. I think, Damon, you were just up in Helsinki last week, and everyone hesitates to cross the street. Like I used to kind of fuck with people a little bit. Like the light would change, and I'd jump out early, and people get really angry. But that's a civilization that has extremely high standards. Those are moral and ethical frameworks. Maybe the expression isn't so much that we can go off in any direction and come up with anything, but maybe the freedom of expression has to do with the exploration that each of us building these environments have a certain obligation to do in a schizophrenic sort of a way, where I push forward and I build new spaces and I explore and I find new things in that self-expression that hopefully isn't ripping off other people. And at the same time, perhaps I can keep like a tether back to the mothership, so that I can remember what are the morals and the ethics that this world is built on, and actively criticize other people if they are out of line. There are people that do things that I will say to them, like, that's not cool. And if we don't do that, and if we are all ultimately free, I think we'll just drift out further and further into something that doesn't allow us to connect. Anyway, there it is. That's a couple thoughts.
No, Mark, I totally
All right.
see where you're going.
Rolando, I'm really sorry. We've got the next group of speakers coming through, my friends.
It didn't go so quickly. Yes.
It always does. It always does. But would you all agree that democracy is at least still an ideal worth striving towards?
Say that again.
Oh, I think, Mark, I've opened a whole can of worms. That's worth another conversation. Let's cap it for now and have you back.
We're at the end of let's keep working on it. Yes, we will.
Yeah, let's keep working on it. Let's keep working on it. So, Karen, thanks for moderating that. Damon, Mark,
Thank you all.
Rolando, thanks for your thoughts, for getting deep and philosophical. Fantastic.